Hey, Jeremy, man, I'm really glad to have you take the time. So, thank you for taking the time to talk to Ranken students and anyone out there listening on the internet.
Of course.
I know you're a Ranken graduate, you're a Ranken alumni, so that's the reason for this interview. So, thank you, and let's I guess start with would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Yeah. My name's Jeremy Buesking. I live in St. Louis area. Graduated from Ranken a few years ago, and since then have gone on to basically be a software engineer at Daugherty Business Solutions, which is a consultant agency. We have a lot of different clients, but yeah, just been there for about 2 years, working on code.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so you graduated right in 2020. We were talking like the
Hmm.
pandemic hit, and you were on spring break, and then we had an extended spring break, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you
The last two
graduated.
months.
So what was
Yeah.
it like, graduating in COVID era? Like, what was your first job, and how did you wind up at Doherty?
Oh yeah, very weird because when I started at Rankin, I was still waiting tables as my primary source of income, and then when COVID did start, like the restaurant shut down, and was trying to finish up. Like basically, we were in the final stretch of what we were doing at Rankin. Um, I can't specifically remember the project, but I just remember deciding, I'm gonna like start Instacart and just trying to do things to like make money while also just focusing on my finals at Rankin. And then once I finished, it was kind of like a relief. But then the next portion was actually looking for a job, and that was during the pandemic when there's a lot of confusion and there were some hiring freezes, but there's also a lot of places that needed more people to come in and help work on code and work on projects, and especially in the IT space. So it was kind of a mixed bag at first, but I ended up kind of landing at Doherty by just kind of connections with Rankin, and then we actually went and visited there when I was in 2019 with Rankin, so I had some connections there. So I had some people there, and finally, when they opened up a spot, they basically kind of integrate you into what their DU system is, Doherty University, and from there they find a good client match for you and a good team to kind of like focus you in on. So I got lucky. I wouldn't say lucky. I worked really hard, but yeah, to find that spot.
Yeah, you created your own luck kind of thing
Yeah,
through
pretty
hard work.
much.
So, but it wasn't your first job. Doherty wasn't.
No. So actually, my first job right out of the gate was at this place called Eagle Tech, and it was basically a government contracting job. Everyone there was like really great, really helpful. Essentially, what I did was their Scott Air Force Base in O'Fallon, that whole area. They basically had people kind of come in, and there's a lot of mobility things, a lot of like in the military, like kind of moving units. I don't know. It was very confusing at first.
Yeah.
It's been a couple of years, so I don't remember the details. But essentially, I was contracted to the military, which was a good opening experience and opportunity. But I wanted to kind of do something a little bit, I get more creative, but also just not within the rigidness of government work. I had to get a lot of security clearances. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of overhead and just a lot of specific things to be wary of. I don't know. I found it a little stressful. So when I heard that Doherty was kind of doing their DU program again, I really wanted to get in there because I was interested in the kind of the work they were doing and the clients that they had.
I remember going out there with you as a student the
Mm-hmm.
summer of 19, I think you said, and
Yeah.
they had essentially a party that was open to the public
Yeah.
for being rated a good workplace to work in St. Louis.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was a memorable little trip that we took out there. And I remember talking to you. You kind of had you set a goal in your mind was to go to work there. I think
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
after kind of being around that.
Hmm. And it's
And
funny because we went there. We got to see the office space, which was it was a cool location. I remember like everyone there being really nice. The office space seemed like open and collaborative, and it seemed fun. So what's funny about that is I've been remote working. So as soon as I got hired with them, like I haven't even been to the office since that time. But it is open now. They allow people to go in, so I guess I could show up there.
so your job title is a software engineer.
Yep.
And what languages do you primarily work with today?
Java mostly.
Java. Okay.
So yeah, I got placed in an automation testing group. So I'm doing a lot of testing, but it's like automated testing and not manual. So we write a lot of Java, and then also this programming language called Cucumber and Gherkin, which is like one of the pain points between developers and business side people is kind of communicating tech stuff. And what Gherkin does is it's basically it writes these files out in a very plain language that says like when I do this, I expect this, this, and this to happen. So business people can kind of read that, but within those lines of script is the actual Java code where you can kind of go in and actually do some logical stuff. So it kind of bridges the gap between technical side and then like business,
Yeah.
like straightforward stuff. So
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Um, so you're working from home, and so what's your 9 to 5 like? I mean, what do you do?
wake up at 8 a.m. and I immediately have a meeting where right now, so I should probably mention the client I'm working for is Edward Jones. So right now they're trying to transition a lot of their old legacy applications and software to Salesforce, which I had only heard of a few months ago because their stock was doing well. I was like looking over some investing stuff, but like, apparently Salesforce is just like another way for financial advisors to do meetings and figure out their clients, and it's basically like a one-stop shop for financial um, people to kind of do their stuff. So sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought, but yeah, basically working on that, working on transition. I'm testing the transition from their legacy software over to this new Salesforce stuff, and it's the last 2 months of this whole deployment, so it's like kind of like scrambling. So 8 a.m. I immediately wake up and I sit in a meeting and I listen to all the defects that are that are happening and all the bugs and stuff. And so kind of my job right now is to kind of go in and find candidates for automation. So kind of like determining what needs to be automated in Salesforce to make sure that when they launch it, it works for these financial advisors. So yeah, 8 a.m. immediately sitting in the meeting, and then do a little bit of coding, doing a little bit of testing. Right now, I'm working on email verification stuff. So it seems like a very kind of like small section, but there's a lot of stuff that is involved there. Then I take lunch, and then I kind of got another stand-up meeting to kind of like go over details and like focus down on certain things. So honestly, right now, right in this specific time that you've caught me in, I'm in like a lot of meetings, and it's actually not great. but
I get it.
but I'm yeah, like in the next couple weeks, once they finally first deploy this first run of Salesforce, I'll be actually writing code again. So I'm looking forward to that. I could just like put on some music and get down to actual coding this automation, these automation tests.
Okay. And so you're working by 8 a.m. and a typical day you're done at
Done around 4. That's when I
done
go
around
pick up my
4.
son.
Okay.
Yeah, I might come like that's the thing with work from home is it's kind of invaded our home lives where like I'll even kind of just like have the computer open and kind of be checking some stuff until about 5 or 5:30
Yeah.
until my wife kind of comes in and says, "Why are you still looking at your work computer?" So
Yeah. You get it.
that's kind of ever present in my life right now. So yeah,
Yeah. Well, I'm teaching an online class for the first time in my professional career,
yeah,
and in person, it's very clear these are the hours of the class. And
yeah,
students are going to have questions off hours, but
hmm
they're just less frequent, right? So I'm very frequently answering questions late at night that I never,
yeah,
again, never used to have to do that
right, exactly,
as often. So I can relate. And certainly, COVID hit, that again, that line got blurred for me as well. So I understand
big time. Oh
that.
yeah.
Why'd you want to get into this industry?
You know, it was a couple things. It was first I'd been in the hospitality industry for over a decade, kind of doing the same thing, and felt like I got to a point in that career track where I kind of done it all, for I guess lack of a better way to say it. But I'd done it, and then also my wife, who I had met actually at the restaurant I worked at. She transitioned out and had a more 9 to 5 job, whereas I was working more 5 to 9. So we didn't see each other. There was kind of a disconnect where our schedules are completely opposite. So I was like, well, I want to go back to school, and if I'm going to go back to school for something, it's going to be something that involves technology. I wasn't exactly sure what. I went to Ranken and I talked to a recruiter and basically found out that I wanted to kind of work with code development because I remembered in my path making like sites from HTML and just kind of like messing around with websites and actually being able to like write something in code and then see it displayed and actually see something that you created was really interesting to me, because I studied guitar for a long time. I just liked the idea of creating something and making something and practicing over and over and over, and then seeing what you've kind of created. It gives you a sense of pride. So I wanted something like that with IT.
Cool. Cool. Good answer. Good answer. Um, I think you've really had a really ideal path in the sense that you went to Ranken, you worked hard, and you landed a very successful job, career. What advice would you give to someone who's, just starting out or maybe about to graduate and start on that job hunt to find success?
I'd say there's always going to be anxieties, especially when, I mean, yeah, especially if you are starting out initially searching for a job. There's going to be anxieties because you need a job to survive, but that you should just kind of keep plugging away. And it's probably not like this for everybody, but there's a certain type of imposter syndrome that gets talked about in tech a lot. Um, some people don't feel it. I feel like some people, most people do. That's never going to any code. There's some days where I felt like, oh, sorry. Am I still here for you?
Yeah, you were lagging, but you're good.
Oh no, I think my internet's pooped out.
I'm going to pause. It's okay. I can pause the recording. Okay, so we are back recording. So Jeremy was frozen for a little bit there, and we were talking about advice you would give to recent graduates, and you were talking about imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't feel like that fully goes away. There's some days where I feel like a genius, like I figured something out and I'm the best coder in the world. But there's other times when I come across a problem, because this job is like a big puzzle solving job most of the time. You look at something, it should be running correctly, it's not. You got to figure out why. Sometimes I feel like I'm an idiot, but like you should just never be afraid to kind of ask for help. Usually, if you're seeing something that is completely confusing, there's somebody that's seen that before. So I feel like if you can get into a zone where you can be collaborative with people and just like connect with people, it helps a lot. At least for me, because I remember initially, I came into Ranken coming back into school after not having been in school for like almost 10, 15 years. So like to me, coming back to something or starting school again at my age was like daunting a little bit, but just having my classmates around me to kind of help me bolster me up a little bit, I don't know, just like gave me confidence essentially to know that you're not alone, and people are struggling the same way you are in a sense, trying to learn this stuff. And then even going into, it's like Daugherty, like a job front, like it's completely different looking at a completely enterprise system versus something that you've created. I think it's just like you can't really replicate that too much in a classroom setting. So like that can also be intimidating in its own right. But luckily I had a lot of good coworkers, and I think Daugherty is good at hiring good people, to where I felt really comfortable bringing a problem to them, being like, listen, I've been banging my head for an hour against this problem. I just need another set of eyes. And then, of course, someone sees something so minute, like a detail so minute that you're like, oh, I've been, okay, I could have, yeah. It's that kind of thing of like, you're going to sometimes, and some people don't because they're like hyper geniuses, but there's going to be moments where you feel demoralized or you feel like an imposter, but everyone goes through that kind of stuff. And just to push through that, because everyone has those types of feelings. So yeah.
It's a normal feeling.
Big time.
Yeah.
And you only get better as you go. There's always going to be moments where you're like, I should know this, but you don't. But it gets better. The more experience you get more confidence, essentially.
Great. In the, I guess you'd say 3 years experience you have there been any cool software projects that you've worked on that you just really enjoyed more than others?
I working at Edward Jones and like kind of like seeing their systems, I guess what was cool about that essentially, it was like I got to learn more of what a financial advisor does, and I actually learned more about how to like my personal life, how to set up my portfolio, or like just like jargon and terms, I don't know. So like, but in terms of actual software, Jones is like 20 years old, so like looking at that is like It's almost just like, wow, this stuff still runs. It still exists. I guess nothing like too super interesting because it's more businessy type stuff, but I I liked the idea of learning more about my finances and getting
Yeah.
an idea of how I'd want to save. So I mean, like being in those systems is kind of neat.
Yeah, and I often hear this kind of thing where it's like, hey, I'm in this industry, be it finance or manufacturing or just pick your industry, and
Hmm.
while I feel confident in the code, I don't know the industry at all. So I
Right.
often hear I have such a learning curve, not on the coding side, but I have to
Hmm.
learn the industry to be able to build software for that industry.
Yeah,
And
that's 100% true.
yeah, and so like one thing that sticks out to me is like, hey, you learned finance, and now you might handle your personal finance and your investment
Hmm.
better because you learned what a index fund was versus a mutual versus whatever,
Exactly.
and fees and all this kind of jazz. But like I always
Hmm.
remember one alumni said, I might be repeating myself here, but they worked for Anheuser-Busch, and to learn how Anheuser-Busch brews beers, not how a home
Yeah.
brewer brews beer, but
Right.
this is how the big dog brews beer
Yeah.
and all their
On such a
systems,
macro level.
all the macro that goes into it, and the temperatures and the thermometers and all all the things,
Yeah.
and when this happens and that happens, and open that valve and shut that and turn that, and he said learning the brewing process at Anheuser-Busch was far harder than learning how to code for the software side.
Oh, I would
So
agree with that 100%.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like hitting the ground running when I first was at EJ, I didn't understand any of the terminology. I didn't understand anything of like how stocks are traded or worked, anything like that. I just knew they existed and I knew they were important, but now, now I have a better handle on like how that all works. And I feel like that's even just good life lesson type stuff, you know?
Yeah, well, that's cool. So you kind of started to talk about like today's a little bit. You're like, oh, Doherty's good at hiring, and
Mhm.
well, actually, just forget Doherty. But what's the job market out there like today? Like, what do you see out there in the market? Is it a hot market? Is it a cold market? Somewhere in between, hot and cold? What?
I think it depends on maybe what you kind of specialize in. I haven't like really looked at my LinkedIn too much or like kind of like delved into that, but there was for a long time I was getting I feel like maybe a lot of people get this, but getting a lot of like recruiters like messaging me like, "Hey, do you want to make a switch?" Blah blah blah, this and that, and like kind of like bombarding me almost every day with stuff. But I feel like I don't see that super as much anymore. But I don't think it's indicative of like the market turning bad. I feel like it's still a strong market. I feel like people are the big conversation right now is AI, right? Like, oh, it's gonna like take a bunch of jobs, but I mean, while it's maybe the case in 15, 20 years, I don't see it doing anything like that right now. I feel like best case scenario, AI will there's a lot of mundane copy and paste tasks that coders have to do just to like get certain projects set up and just like structure things in a certain way. I think AI can help offload that so developers can be more of the thinking kind of like big picture
So
kind
I
of
gotta
stuff.
ask, have you used ChatGPT to help solve any problems?
I actually have. I
Yeah, yeah,
know.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, me too.
yeah,
Me
because
too.
it's very conversational and also it remembers like if I asked something 3 questions ago, it takes that into account for examples and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, one of my favorite quotes about, just all this rage that is AI is it can take a developer and make them, a more efficient developer. And
Hmm.
and so, maybe does that lead to, okay, if you can hire one developer that does the job of five developers, maybe there's less demand for developers, but like you said, it's trained on the data set that is problem solving up until this point, and the software
Hmm.
development is about solving new problems. And so ChatGPT
Hmm.
is not good at solving new problems because it's only like elite code and all these codes and
Yeah.
problems that have been solved 1,000 times. It's really good at solving those problems, but
Hmm.
it's not necessarily good at solving new problems that haven't been solved before. So, anyways, that's my rant on it. This should be questions to you, but it just conversation, right?
No,
So,
right, yeah, no, and well, it's true because like it doesn't know your specific environment too. It's not gonna know like I can't ask it like, well, if I need the Edward Jones contact for this and to load this profile in this specific Jones, it's not gonna know anything like that. It's gonna
no,
know very general stuff. I use it for when I'm like, oh, I know I can do this, but I don't know exactly how I can do it. If that
no,
makes sense.
yeah,
Like
yep,
yeah,
100%,
basically, very
100%
general stuff.
makes sense. So your observation on the market, still a good market, still lots of
Yeah.
jobs, lots of opportunity.
Yeah, I feel like the future is what people are most like, what's going to happen? But right now, I feel like if you are a bright, intelligent coder, and if you have a good, affable personality, people want to hire you in general. Like your skills are important, but your soft skills are maybe just as important.
And to add to what you're saying, software to engineers, the way that you problem solve, the way that you have trained your mind to solve problems, even if software development went away in the worst case scenario and ChatGPT writes all the software in the world for us,
Hmm.
you have a brain now that can solve problems regardless of writing software or not. So that is going to be valuable in many aspects of life.
100%. Yeah, definitely.
So last question that I have at least pre-scripted is this a lifelong career for you, or do you see yourself in 30 years changing industries?
I don't think I necessarily would change industries, but I feel like in, 10, 15 years, maybe I'm not like deep down in the pits with the code, but more of a like, I think my goal is like if I can get really good at coding, it'd be more of an architectural kind of a role I'd want to see myself in, which
Yeah.
is just like top down looking at the entire view of it. That's Daugherty University had a really cool like one-off class where we talked about architecture and we kind of like set up this kind of program and thought about it in a more higher view architectural way, and it was really interesting to me. But that'd be like down the line. If I for some reason get burnt out on code, I would definitely stay in tech, but it'd be more of like project manager or something like that would be my goal, where I can liaison between business people and tech people because I know the tech side and maybe I can describe it to business people in a way that's not as intimidating or confusing to them. I would want to be like that bridge between super technical and business.
I think you'd be good
Essentially.
at that. I think you'd be good at that. Just to kind of wrap things up here, I'm super happy for you. As when you were coming through as my student and just as a student at Ranken, I thought you deserved, because you worked hard. I thought that you were deserving and I'm just glad to see it worked out for you.
I appreciate it, and honestly, choosing Rankin was probably one of the best choices that I made for my personal life because I remember I did the 2 year program, but I did it in a year and a half because I took summer classes because I essentially had to catch up with everybody else, and it was a grind, but it was like I have a lot of fond memories of it because it forced me to. Sometimes me personally, I could start something and then get disinterested in it or like get pulled somewhere else. But I took this as an opportunity to do something very serious for myself and to improve my life, and I dedicated myself to it 100%. And you guys, the faculty and all the students that were with me were just like supportive and honestly, yeah, it's a bright spot in my life. I have a lot of fond memories of
Well,
Rankin. So
I could tell that you were applying yourself, right? As a teacher, we always appreciated that, right? We saw that, and that's why I say you're deserving because, yeah, you kind of wish every student was like that. So
yeah.
happy for you, man, and congratulations on the child and the
Thank you.
newborn.
Yeah.
I guess 18 months you said, but and if you ever want to move back to Illinois side, Belleville misses you. Although,
My wife was like, if you buy me a pool, I'll live wherever you want. I'm like, well, I just gotta find a house with a pool.
there you go. There you go. Cool, man. When did you get married?
2019. So I was actually at Rankin when I
That's
got married,
right.
October.
That's right.
Hmm.
I thought that it was like either right around you were a student or maybe just after. Yeah.
Yeah, 2019 to 2020 was a real whirlwind of 2 years for me. So yeah, got a lot of stuff done.
Yeah. Well, very cool. Well, hey, thanks for taking the time again, and
Yeah,
best of luck in your career, and let's stay in touch.
yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay. Take care, man.
See ya. You too.
All right. Bye.